A jet prepares to land at a busy airport.
Cabin crew, seats for landing, please. Thank you.
Down on the ground, it's midday. But the pilot's been living for the past few days in another time zone to which his body's adapted. In that other time zone, it's still 4 o'clock in the morning. So it's 4 o'clock in the pilot's body. That could mean a great difference in his performance at this critical moment.
Green light. Flaps, 50-50 to left. Speed brake, forward. Landing checks are complete.
3 a.m. in a hospital, an emergency operation. The surgeon and his team are coming to the end of a night shift. They'll do what they can to save the patient's life, but it can't be their best. Their body time says they should be asleep, and all their faculties are running in low gear suitable to sleep. Their bodies and ours are structured in time as well as in bone and tissue. Unraveling that time structure is one of science's most intriguing problems. Man has known for centuries that he lives in a periodic world subject to great rhythmic cycles. We've learnt that light follows darkness as a result of the Earth's rotation round the sun. The period of time this takes we call a day. By using mechanical clocks, we divide it into 24 equal parts called hours. We've observed that the moon goes through a cycle from new moon to full moon over a longer period of time, which we call a month. The moon's changes coincide with the ebb and flow of the tides, which occur every 12.5 hours. We know that as spring follows winter, flowers will appear, that leaves will fall in the autumn, and many birds migrate as seasons follow each other through the longer period we call a year. Winter drives many animals into hibernation and slows down the rest. A most important rhythmic cycle is the alternation between darkness and light. Around dawn, animals and birds become active. They emerge from their nests and lairs, they begin to feed and hunt. They keep active through the day. Then, towards dusk, they withdraw to rest. Other animals begin to stir, the night-active ones. Another shift takes over the environment. The result is a marvelous economy. Not only does each animal occupy a place in the food chain, but it does so at a particular time. Use of the environment is maximized. It would be common sense to assume that animals are responding directly to dusk or dawn. But this conclusion would be wrong, as laboratory experiments show. A bean plant, filmed here by time-lapse camera, will raise its leaves in daytime and lower them at night. It'll continue to do so even if it's kept in constant light, as here, or in constant dark. You can keep temperature and humidity constant, and you can screen off all known variables in the environment. The rhythm persists. Its cause must be inside the plant. As biologists say, it's endogenous. One of the world's most important centers for studying endogenous rhythms is the Max Planck Institute at Erlangen in Germany. Here a team of scientists is working with animals of many species. The animals are housed in rooms where no clue whether it's day or night outside can reach them. They're screened from noise and other disturbance. Temperature and humidity can be controlled at will, and so can artificial lighting. Much study has gone into the activity-rest rhythm of animals. Even in constant light, animals continue to show a cycle of rest and activity. The cycle can be measured conveniently from a point such as the beginning of activity. In the case of this chipmunk, activity means running in a wheel. It'll do this over a period of several hours and then retire to rest. As the wheel turns, it triggers a micro switch which activates a pen recorder. Each turn of the wheel means a stroke on the chart. In this way, its activity can be recorded over many months and even years. The recording rolls are sliced up, and each strip representing one animal's activity for a day is pasted onto a chart. Charts show that the animal continues to follow a regular cycle of rest and activity. But each day activity begins a little later, perhaps 15 minutes than the day before. In other words, its activity-rest cycle is longer than our 24-hour day. This is called free running. This animal's activity is beginning a little earlier each day. Its free-running cycle is shorter than our 24-hour day. Experiments with many species put this finding beyond doubt. The activity-rest cycle continues in constant dark or constant light. It doesn't depend on environmental signals such as dawn and dusk, but on some timing mechanism inside the animal. It's as though the animal has an internal clock. Because the rhythm is always shorter or longer than our 24-hour day, it's called a circadian rhythm. From the Latin circa, meaning about, and dies, meaning day. About a day. Does man have an internal clock? In 1962, a French scientist, Michel Siff, was hauled out of a cave 400 feet under the Alps. He'd spent 2 months down there alone, a record for endurance of solitude and darkness. He'd also pioneered a method for studying human circadian rhythms. A year later, he supervised a more ambitious experiment, also in the Alps. In one cave, 210 feet down, they placed a man aged 25. And a woman aged 26 was placed in a separate cave 230 feet down. Physical conditions were somewhat better than in Siff's cave the year before, but they too were allowed no clue as to what time it was above ground. No watches, no radios. When awake, they were allowed a lamp of low intensity. They were instructed to phone researchers above ground when they went to sleep and when they awoke. This gave a measure of their activity-rest cycle, their subjective day. Some physiological functions were also studied, their pulse and breathing rates. Electrocardiograms of the man were taken and relayed to the surface. After 3 months, the woman was hauled up. She was in good health, but went to hospital for follow-up studies. The man stayed down another month, 4 months in all. Like the woman, when he came up, he discovered he'd been underground far longer than he thought. They were about 30 days out in their calculations. They'd been free running, just like animals, living an activity-rest cycle longer than 24 hours. At Erling in Germany, more closely controlled experiments have been carried out since 1964. More than 190 men and women of different nationalities have come to this underground bunker. It contains 2 isolation units shielded by double concrete walls.
So, please come in. Here.
Dr. Wefer, scientist in charge, greets an American volunteer.
Come here.
Here, subjects spend 4 weeks in total isolation. They speak to no one, they have no telephone, no clock, no radio, no TV. No noise that might give them a clue to outside time will ever reach them. Even the Earth's magnetic field is screened off. The larder's stocked with food of their choice.
As you may know,
The light will be on all the time, even when she's asleep.
even when you are sleeping, So, Maureen, above the bed, you can see the...
There's an emergency button above the bed. They'll be let out at any time, but few have used it.
And now I have to leave you. The experiment will really start, and at last I have to ask you for your watch. Thank you. So, I wish you a good time for the next 4 weeks.
Her activity will be monitored just like an animal's. There are sensors under the carpet in the apartment which trigger this recorder here. They also activate the lights on this plan. This subject will spend 4 weeks in constant light. Others have lived in constant dark. They have to cook for themselves. While they're sleeping, fresh food is placed in the lobby for them to collect later. They're also required to help keep a record of their activities and body functions. The rest of the time is theirs, to play or paint, read or work for exams. All find the experience interesting. Only 5 have given up before time. In the control room, monitoring goes on continuously. Having no clocks, the subject is free to go to bed when she feels like it, and to get up when she wakes naturally. Like animals, human beings in constant light or dark will free run, and most free run to a period longer than 24 hours. The average is about 25 hours, but some live a cycle as short as 16 hours or as long as 48. They may be living half as fast as we are outside. Here the scientist draws up the girl's activity chart. Already by the 5th day she's falling behind, running longer than 24 hours. She keeps her own record like all the subjects. When they emerge, they're always astonished to discover how far out they are. Besides activity, their body temperature is constantly recorded through this line attached to a rectal thermometer. Temperature also shows a circadian rhythm. Around 5 a.m. it's at its lowest. It rises steeply in the morning, then more slowly to reach a peak around 8 p.m. After that, it drops steeply through the night back to its lowest level. Dozens of human body functions are now known to have a circadian rhythm, all reaching a peak at different times in a closely harmonized pattern. These rhythms affect us at every moment of our lives. This is what it means over a 24-hour day. Fast asleep at 6 in the morning. Adrenal hormones are pumping through this man's blood because his body knows he's going to get up soon, when that clock goes off. In fact, he's already stirring. The body seems to know the time of waking. "7 a.m. Sex hormones, in men and women too, are at their peak. No one quite knows why. Skin's not very sensitive to pain at this hour. He'd feel it more later, but if he draws blood, it'll take longer to clot at this time. 8 a.m. A hurried breakfast. A pity. If you like food, this is the best time to indulge. It won't fatten you as much as lunch or supper. 10 a.m., a pile of work to do. But he doesn't feel like work yet, and it's not his good time for making decisions. Have a read of the paper instead. His secretary put the flowers there, not that he'll notice them much. Sight and smell aren't really sharp until evening. 1 p.m., a sandwich and a drink for lunch. Well, perhaps 2 drinks, but you better watch it. Alcohol affects you more at midday than it does at night. 4 p.m. He's nearing his peak of efficiency. 20% higher than in the morning. 6 p.m. Physical vigor rising to its peak. Just as well, since he's about to battle into the rush hour. His blood pressure's rising too. He'll be more aggressive now. 8 p.m. All his senses at a peak. Taste, smell, hearing, eyesight. He feels warm. Temperature's at its peak. So's his body weight. It's a turning point of the day. 3 a.m., all his hormones running down. Temperature dropping to its lowest. Heartbeat and breathing slow. But some of his functions are still coming up to peak. Cells are dividing to regenerate his skin. And his hearing's very sharp. Night is a busy time for ambulances, for emergency services. Most births happen then. Peak hour for the onset of natural labor is 1 a.m. The peak time for actual birth is 4:16. Death, too, tends to come in the early morning. Most heart failures happen then. And so do most accidents in factories, most road and air crashes. It's significant that if you get rushed to hospital around this time, you'll find the doctors and nurses at their lowest ebb of efficiency. Like all workers on night shift, they're less efficient than those on day shift. They're slower, more likely to make wrong decisions, to make mistakes. Most deaths during surgery happen at this time. The fact is that human efficiency also follows a circadian rhythm. In the bunker, most subjects maintain a 25-hour rhythm, but some free run to very long periods. In these cases, a split sometimes develops between the activity rhythm, which may run to over 30 hours, and the temperature rhythm, which stays around 25 hours. This is called internal desynchronization. Another type of internal desynchronization occurs during air travel across several time zones. Most air travelers know that if, for instance, they fly west across the Atlantic from Britain, they'll arrive in a zone where the time is at least 5 hours earlier. They know that for a couple of days they'll find it hard to adjust their sleep to the local pattern. They'll feel below par, headachy, tired, detached from reality. On holiday, it won't matter, but wise businessmen won't take big decisions for a couple of days. Pilots on long tours of duty who have to cross many time zones on successive days will find their sleep pattern grossly disturbed. Here's a typical tour flown by one British pilot over a period of 23 days. He first flew from London to Toronto, and next day back to England, then to Toronto again. After a day's rest, he flew back to London, where he had another day's rest. Then he went to Hong Kong, a flight of over 24 hours. Next day, he flew to Tokyo, and then on to Honolulu. From there, he went to San Francisco and back to Honolulu. Then again to San Francisco, where he took a day's rest before flying back to Honolulu. Next day, he flew to Tokyo, then on to Hong Kong. From there, he flew to Delhi, where he had a day's rest before flying home to London again. On this chart, white bars show the hours the pilot slept each day measured against GMT. his home body time, on the scale at the top. He never slept 2 consecutive days at the same time. On one day, he flew the aircraft when he hadn't slept for 22 hours, a fairly common thing among airline pilots. They can find themselves coping with tricky landings and other emergencies in a state of severe fatigue. In addition, airline schedules demand much night flying when pilots, like other night shift workers, are anyway at their lowest efficiency. There are 10 times as many air accidents at night as in daytime. If the discovery of circadian rhythms has raised problems, it has also raised hopes. One of the greatest is under test in this Minnesota high school.
Today we are going to continue with our self-measurements. Remember to carry out all the procedures that we indicated yesterday, such as the standardization, sitting in the proper way, standing when you're taking grip strength, and holding your arm at a 30-degree angle. These things are important in taking self-measurements. The self-measurements that we are going to take are on the board: the temperature, mood, vigor, pulse, blood pressure, eye-hand skill, finger counting, and grip strength. You can take out your kits now and start these measurements. As soon as you...
These children are being trained to measure their own body rhythms. They will learn what those rhythms are like in health. In later years, if there's any marked change, it can be taken as a sign that something's going wrong, and they can seek early advice from a doctor. For doctors, too, it could be important to know what a person's measurements are, because what is high blood pressure in one person may be merely normal in another. Such is the difference from person to person and the fluctuation of a rhythm round 24 hours. This experiment in high schools has the backing of the American National Science Foundation, which believes it could lead to an important step forward in preventive medicine. In a world short of doctors, occasional self-measurement would also be cheap, just the cost of simple instruments. Already the children are carrying the experiment a stage further by training their families, who are proving equally receptive.
Okay, just relax your hand, though. Just relax
Hold
your
the hand up.
Yeah, just here. You can just rest it on my knee or something. Just
And
relax your
then
hand.
when I first hear the
When you
thump
first
is
hear
when
it, right.
that would be the first figure I would record.
Right. Got, yeah, right.
Medicine has long searched for a definition of health. It could be that having all your rhythms normal and in harmony with each other is the answer.
This goes very lightly, the release valve.
Mm-hmm.